Good evening, YouTube. Welcome to another one of my half-baked tutorial videos. So I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about how I'm using the Elektron Trinity. Used to be called the Dark Trinity with the Mark I machines. I don't know if we're calling the Grey Trinity or the Mark II Trinity, whatever. These are the Elektron Analog 4 voice analog synthesizer. The Octatrack, it's a performance sampler, and then we've got the analog rhythm or RYTM. However you want to say that. I'm going to say it rhythm because that's just how I roll. Okay. I also have the analog heat, which everything goes through before it goes to the mixer. Let me tell you a little bit first about the routing of stuff. So, starting with the analog 4, I've got the main out, so the analog 4 being routed into the inputs A and B of the Octatrack. And then, similarly, I've got the main out of the analog rhythm going into inputs C and D of the Octatrack. I then have the main out of the Octatrack going into the analog heat, and then from the analog heat out into the mixer. And then when I record, it's a USB mixer thing, and now I record that straight into the computer, which is what I'm doing right now. Okay, so MIDI. I've got MIDI out from the Octatrack going into a thing called a Kenton through 5. It's a small silver box that basically splits a MIDI signal. So you go out of the Octatrack into this Kenton box MIDI in, and that's got 5 outputs. So I'm sending MIDI in then to the analog 4 and to the Elektron analog rhythm. Not actually using the SE2 at the moment, so while you can see it, it's switched off. It's kind of not used at the moment. I can't bring myself to sell it. It's such a cool sounding synth. I'm sure I'll find a use for it. So that's kind of the audio MIDI setup. If you've seen some of my previous videos, you'll notice this is quite a change from what I had before. I've scaled down. I had too many bits of gear and not enough fucking hands. So hopefully this will be better. Okay. So let's see. I have the Octatrack as the master clock, so that's why the MIDI out is coming from there and all that shit. So the Octatrack is then the master clock, the master sequencer as well. It is not the master sequencer. So the Octatrack is the master clock. Oh fuck, battery's running flat already. Can you fucking believe that? I'll keep going until it runs out. Okay, so what we've got then is the Octatrack being the master, and it's basically set up such that I can choose a pattern on the Octatrack. There's pattern A1, and the analog 4 and the rhythm will automatically also switch to pattern A1. So they sort of stay in sync like that. And how is that done? Okay, so you have to go into the settings menu and then go into MIDI and then go to sync. And then you've got to make sure you are selecting send, transport, and clock. So those have to be send, and then under the MIDI sync section you've got program change, and you have to make sure you send program change, so that's selected, and then you've got to choose a channel to send it on. I've chosen channel 16. That's kind of important, the channel 16 bit, because then over on the rhythm and the analog 4 you've got to make similar settings. So if we go into settings on these and we go into MIDI config, first into sync, we've got to make sure that you select transport receive and clock receive. So clock is at the top, clock receive, transport receive, and also program change receive. These settings are exactly the same on both the analog 4 and the rhythm. Let's go down to MIDI config, make sure I'm not fucking lying to you. Yep, they are. They're exactly the same settings. Clock receive, transport receive, and program change receive. Then the next bit, oh fuck, too far back. MIDI config again, and channels. And in channels, you scroll all the way down to see program change in channel. And there you've got to set it to the same one you set on the Octatrack. So mine was 16, so there I've set program change in channel 16. Once you've done all that, the machines will all stay in sync as soon as you change patterns. Very cool feature. Okay, so that's how they're set up and staying in sync. So if I play, they all start playing. If I change patterns, as soon as it rolls around, they all change. Very clever, very cool. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the stuff on these machines. I have a very similar setup for almost all of my songs on the Analog 4. I like to have a bass sound on track 1. So let's just go get out of here and mute some stuff. So here we go, there's a bass sound on track 1. And it's got a little performance setup to tweak the cutoff of the bass, the filter cutoff of the bass. I'm not actually going to go into explaining how performances are set up. There's loads of videos on the net you can watch to see how that works. On track 2, I've got a lead sound, although I don't have a bloody lead sound because it's not in this pattern. Let's switch to that one. Okay, so there's my lead sound, and I've got another performance to tweak the lead sound. Again, filters and reverb is what this particular performance does. Then the next 2 tracks are pads and effects. So if I choose channel 4, let's first look at this pad. Go into the sequencer, there's one trig there, and if I look at the notes page, you'll see there's a conditional trig set to trigger this particular step only once in every 8 loops. So that's condition 1/8. So that's how that one works. And why can't you hear it? Well, there it is. I have to be very quiet so you can hear it. Okay. Let's look at track 3, because that has a similar thing going on. Just one trig, but you're never hearing it. Why are you never hearing it? Well, because this trig is set up to be a fill trig. And what that means is it will only sound when I trigger a fill. And to trigger a fill, you hold in function and press the fill button. And when you do that, the next time it loops around, there you go. Did you see it? It starts. So this is another, it's a transition sound. I've set like a very long attack time on the envelope, so it makes it tweak. It tweaks the. It's like a rise. Let's call it. Right. Let's press stop there. Let's have a look at the rhythm. So, similar sort of thing going on. I've got drum loop, very simple drum loop, kick, snare, hats, a few little toms. And then I've got a few scenes going on. Scenes are basically a way to change all, a set of parameters at a push of a button. So hit one of these buttons, it changes all the parameters that you've locked into the scene. I've also got some fills set up, but pretty basic stuff on the rhythm. I know that I am not really pushing the boundaries of the rhythm yet. I've got a lot to learn on that one. Let's look a little bit now at the Octatrack, which is the main hub of everything. So, as far as patterns go, what I tend to do is use generally four patterns to make up one song. That way I can have 4 songs in one bank. And the differences between the patterns are often subtle. The first one of 4 may have unmute stuff here. There we go. That's the full loop playing. So the first one of 4 may have sort of less in it, like an intro type pattern, and then you'll hear as I change them, more stuff is added. So there's a change in the hi-hats there. This one brings in, so these are actually different patterns from the analog rhythm that you're hearing changes to, I guess. Change to the next one, changes to the hi-hats, and this changes to all the loops inside each machine. A lot of them are subtle because, I like to make music that slowly changes and progresses over time. If we look at the scenes, though, you'll notice I've got a ton of scenes for every single song. And you'll notice because of all this stuff lighting up, there's stuff all over the place. So for instance, if I move to the next scene, you'll hear that more stuff has come in because I'm using mutes on the amp page here. If I choose one of these, you'll see there's volume controllers to change things, bring them in and out. So not only am I using the patterns to bring new sounds in and out, I'm using the scenes on the Octatrack to bring things in and out, samples and stuff. Let's stop that for a second. So that's kind of how I like to have the pattern set up. As I said, 4 patterns per song, and then variations in each pattern with scenes. I then should probably also mention, what these tracks are being used for. So I use tracks 1 to 4 for sample loops and stuff. So this particular song's got a couple of loops on track 1 and 2, like a top loop, shakers and hats and stuff. Then I've got a guitar loop. I'll tell you what, why don't I mute some stuff here and then you'll hear it. So, this one's filtered, so if I do this, and let's maybe mute the drums. Okay, so this one's got a guitar loop on it. And there's some randomness going on with an LFO. How is that set up? So this one's got all sorts of fun LFO stuff going on it. I've got one LFO on the... fucking battery's going to die. Okay, back in the room. So, we were looking at this guitar part. So, it's kind of random. There's an LFO, just a triangle wave LFO, modulating the balance, which is the panning, so shifting left and right. Then we've also got an LFO, a random LFO, on the sample start. So because this is a sample that's been sliced up, with all the slices, and you trigger the samples, you modulate the sample start, which is this parameter over here, it plays a random sample, which makes for interesting effects. You can see it sort of jumping about, picking random samples. Kind of cool. I like it. Okay, so on this track, we've got a vocal sample. I like it. And this one has a conditional trig on it, also set to trigger 1 in 8. So you'll see I use a lot of conditional trigs. It's one of the coolest things about these Elektron machines. It really helps bring life and interesting stuff to your arrangements rather than things just repeating over and over and over again. You can affect that in quite a nice way. Okay, on track 4 we've got like a weird sort of, it's a vocal sample, believe it or not, but it's just a snippet of one, which I have. Let's just set these two scenes so you can see what I'm doing here. Basically what I've got is, in these two scenes, I've got the pitch set to shift on this sample. So when I change scenes, you can hear, it sounds kind of weird on its own, but with everything else in the mix, okay. Track 5 and 6 have got the inputs from the analog 4 and the analog rhythm. I'm using through tracks to do this, and the respective inputs are set over here: A and B, C and D, and then I've got the volume cranked up on each one. Okay, now, so yes, on these tracks then, because they're through tracks, you have to trig them. So I've got one trig on each track there. I've basically got 2 bars for each one, and I've got one trig on each track, so that the trig basically allows the sound to come through on a through track. That's kind of just how it works. Then track 7 is the track I'm using as a transition track. So what does that mean? Basically, I'm using the Octatrack almost like a DJ machine, so that I'm able to use the crossfader to fade between songs. How the hell does that work? Okay, so track 7 is set up as a flex track, right? If we go into the trig modes here, what you'll see is I've got 2 trigs. I've got a normal trig, which plays the sound, plays the loop. And then I've got a recording trig, which is also set up as a one-shot trig. Okay, that's important because I only want to sample, I want to trigger sampling, and I want to just record a loop and then let that loop play. And behind track 7 is a recording that's been set up. So I'm using a recorder, track 7. And if we look at the setup of that recorder, you can see I'm setting it to record the source as track 8. Track 8 is the master. Track 8 is a master track. So I'm recording track 8. I'm recording at 32 bars. I don't want it to loop, so I don't want it to go over and over and over again. And I want it to just trig once. So that's the one trig there that we're seeing. So what does that mean, and how does that all work? Well, I'll kind of show you. So if we just press play, and then just stuff. Okay, so what you then do is hold in the track button and press yes, and watch what happens. See the little plus that appears there? That means that sampling has started, and it's sampled for 2 bars. So what I've then done is I've set up a scene that will play just that loop. So if I flip to that scene, what I've got on that particular scene is every single other track. Some weird shit. record that again. Put a fucking trig in this, so I went weird. Let me get out of that. Okay. Right, so now we've got that recorded. And as I was saying, I have every other track on this particular scene. So if we look at the scene 16, I've got every other track muted. So that goes for all of them, except track 7. Track 7 is on max volume. So what happens is, if I flip to that, it still sounds like it's playing the same thing. It is, but what it's actually playing is a loop that I've sampled. And you can hear the actual vocal sample looping over and over again. What that allows you to do then, because you've got the same thing set up on another track, is if I switch patterns now, it's still playing. See, the patterns changed. It's still playing the loop from the previous track. Now, why is that? Well, because on this part, I've got the same thing. I've got recorder 7 and I've got a trig playing. But what happens now when let's keep it playing. What happens now when I start to fade into another scene? It's a different song. Hopefully that all made sense. That's kind of really key to the way that I jam. There are other videos on the net that explain this in a bit more detail, but that is the Octatrack transition trick. Very cool little trick. Okay, what else can I show you? So over and above that, really, I've just got loads of scenes set up here for lots of different interesting transitions and mutes and stuff like that. So generally I'll have the first few scenes set up to introduce sounds. So I'll use the volume muter to bring stuff in and out. Okay, so these are all full volume. Let's go to another one where I do that. Let's go to this pattern. And
let there be music.
Let's go. Right, so we listen to this one. Let's see here. Scene 1 then has volume mutes, or changes to volume, or complete volume mutes, volume min. So I'm using these scenes, as I said, to sort of bring in parts from the Octatrack. Often very subtle. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed my ramblings. I didn't really plan this. I just recorded some stuff, spoke shit, and hopefully made some sense. Maybe not. I don't know. Basically, if you liked this, then give us a thumbs up. But please tell me what sort of stuff you'd like to see in other videos. I seem to have no problem making videos of me jamming music, but when it comes to explaining stuff, unless I know what somebody wants to see or hear, I struggle a bit. So help me out. Tell me what you want to see and hear, and I'll try and do a video that explains that stuff. All right, cheers. Catch you next time.